Hi everybody, this is our first lecture for EDUC 103. We're going to be looking at children's well-being, what it is and how to achieve it. I want to preface the first 4 lectures in the class just by letting you know that these are going to be long and lengthy. You can anticipate the first few to be between probably 30 and 40 minutes each, maybe some will be a little longer. When we get later on in the class, the lectures aren't as long, but the initial concepts in this course are very foundational, and because of that, they're going to be longer lectures in the beginning. So take your time with these. If you need to pause it, if you need to take a break, that's certainly acceptable. How can you be successful while you're watching my videos? Well, all the PowerPoints are posted online. Download them. Have them on your computer. Have them printed out if you want them. Have the textbook open so you can refer to it and make some notes as I basically walk you through the chapter. Go slowly, take your time, and I promise you'll get something out of it. This is really here to help you and give you a good foundation of a topic that's important and unfortunately a topic that's not required by a lot of 4-year institutions. I do need to preface this, having worked for BC3 for 8 years and also working on classes that transfer to other schools. This class does not transfer into most early childhood education programs. It is the equivalent of basically a Child Development 3 course. So this is more of an elective-based course than it is a requirement. I think it should be a requirement by all early childhood programs. This is important information, it's important concepts, and it's things that can really get you in trouble as a new teacher if you don't understand health and safety of children and child development. So even though this isn't a required course by most programs, I think it's an important course. So I'm very passionate about it, and I want you to have a good experience and get a lot out of it. So basically, this class has 2 objectives. This course will count if you want to obtain director credentials in a child care facility. This counts for your licensing, and this will help you with the director credentials. I mentioned this previously, but this is basically a Child Development 3 class in most institutions. Most certifying institutions that certify you as a teacher will only want 2 child development classes. This is the 3rd child development class, so most places don't take it. They'll use it as an elective course, but they won't take it. If you are going into early childhood education in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to take something that's known as the PECT exam. There are 3 modules on child development, reading strategies, social studies strategies, and also health and safety. Health and safety is one of the primary objectives of Module 3 of the PECT exam. Everything that I cover is information that's on that exam, so taking this class will help you with Module 3. It's not going to help you with Module 1 or 2, but it's going to help you with Module 3. Every chapter that we do, I'm going to present for you the NAEYC standards. These are found in your books, but this is kind of my justification on why we do what we do and what the point and purpose of it is. So some of the big concepts and ideas in this chapter are this notion of preventative health. Preventative health basically is trying to help people stay healthy. If we're proactive, we keep people healthy and in good form. Food insecurity is uncertain or limited access to a reliable source of food. We're really going to look at this the second half of the course, but these are 2 important terms and important concepts that you have to be aware of. So preventative health comes from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. My hope is that you learn this in your early Intro to Education, Foundations of Education courses that you took, but you have to understand one of the concepts of preventative health is that in urban districts or poor rural districts, they're not going to have as many of these needs, meaning that the children aren't going to be as healthy as they are in affluent districts. So this creates a struggle, and this creates a challenge that you're going to have to deal with if you end up teaching one of these urban and rural environments. So please keep that in mind as you're reading through the chapter. So what should the school district do in terms of preventative health? Well, quite frankly, they don't do much in terms of preventative health. There have to be a physical screening by the school nurse, periodic times during the year. There has to be lunch that's served, and it has to be healthy and nutritional. The federal level mandates that all children must have lunch in school. In the state of Pennsylvania, it's very weird. A school day is not an official day unless lunch is served. So think about what you experienced when you were in high school, when you were in middle school, and it started snowing. It was 12 p.m., 1 p.m., and they wanted to cancel school. It only counts as a school day for students and for staff if lunch is served. Federal mandates say that children must have access to lunch in schools, and children must have an option for breakfast. You can't force a kid to eat breakfast, but it has to be there. If a kid wants something to eat for breakfast, they have to have that opportunity. So, social and environmental issues, here's a list of them. I'm going to talk about each one of these a little bit. The divide between the rich and the poor in the United States is continuing to grow very far apart. Homelessness really is impacting public schooling as well in early childhood education. What you'll see a lot of is transient populations. You'll see children that start out in one building, move to a different building. Tulsa Public Schools in Oklahoma is a great example of this. Chicago Public Schools, Pittsburgh Public Schools. Kids start out in one elementary school, the parents move, then they jump to another building, they jump to another building, they jump to another building. And sometimes you have kids that show up for school, never come back. The district will try to figure out where that kid is because it's their responsibility, and the kid never comes back. So that child isn't getting an educational foundation when I would argue it's the most important in the early grades, in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, because how is a kid ever going to love school when they're in high school if they hate it when they're in elementary school? That's important, and this is a problem in the United States, especially in your urban districts. Food insecurity is odd in the United States. We have found, and research has proven this, that there's more opportunity for binge eating for people that come from a poor background. They could go weeks without having food, and then money comes in, food is made available, and then they binge eat. So this creates things that can ruin metabolism, it can change health, and that's a problem as well. It fluctuates from periods where kids have access to food and periods in which they don't. And this is bad, and this will hurt them all through life. So from a health perspective, this is going to cause problems, and that's something else you have to consider as well. So dental and medical care. Yeah, all children in the United States have access to medical care, and they deserve the right to it. But you and I both know that it's inequity. There's major inequalities in it. Somebody coming from a more wealthy background is going to have better medical care. They're going to have much better dental care. There's a bigger divide. I'd argue there's a bigger divide for dental care than there is for medical care. School districts can only do so much to provide adequate care to a child, especially with a school nurse who might not be a licensed personnel. So I need to stress this because this is important, and if you end up as an elementary school teacher, this could be a problem for you. Many school districts replaced nurses after No Child Left Behind was passed. Nurses used to be mandated in the state of Pennsylvania that they were always in the building, and they made, in a lot of cases, they made teacher salary. Then they cut nurses, subcontracted them so they could put the money elsewhere, put it into ELL and special ed. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but if you take money from one place, it has to go somewhere else if you need it. So nurses in a lot of school districts are subcontracted. In elementary school, sometimes nurses are only in a building 2 or 3 days a week. So what this basically means is that if there isn't a nurse there, the principal or you as the teacher act as the nurse. You have to call somebody, you have to contact people, you have to get the nurse from another building over there, but this is why you have to learn this stuff in your teacher certification program. When I got certified, I didn't have to learn this stuff. You do now because it's changed and our society's changed. So media advertising. Coming from a marketing background, I find this fascinating because I doubt that this is true. Most research has shown that children under the age of 8 are cognitively and psychologically defenseless against advertising. So basically, if a kid sees something and sees a commercial and it's designed to be appealing and interesting to the child, they're going to want the item, they're going to want it. So in the 1970s, the FTC banned advertising for all children under the age of 6. Now, I note this, but I want to stress this. Most television programs get around this by doing subliminal subconscious advertising in the television program. They put appealing items to children in the program while the kids are watching it, so they're technically still advertising. European nations stop toy advertising until after 10 p.m., which is fascinating to me. So when you see a commercial for a toy or a video game in European nations, it happens after 10 p.m. when the kids are supposed to be in bed. And That's interesting because then parents get to make the decisions. Would that ever fly in the United States? Absolutely not. But I think it's interesting. So you have the responsibility to play children's programming that does not include advertising in schools. I know that some of you might not want to do this because it does take time, but if you're going to show a movie or a program to a kid in a school, clip the commercials out. Magazines for kids, I struggle with this too as a former elementary school administrator, because a lot of the magazines we purchased were loaded with advertising. And you have to be careful and you have to be selective on things that you do. If all else fails, always default to Scholastic. They're a great company and they don't do advertising in their actual newsletter. They send the advertising to the teachers, and then the teachers can make the decision for the kids. So if you're putting magazines in your classroom, just try to be careful because you don't want to overload them with advertising. So substance abuse. Substance abuse is more common in rural environments, even more so than urban environments, mostly dealing with pills. Young children don't understand it. They have a hard time communicating it. Young children aren't going to understand if their parents are abusing probably till they're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. We're going to talk about this later in the course. Children then become at risk for substance abuse. And this can be tied to marketing as well. If they're watching television programs that advertise it, it's going to be a problem as well. So we have, another disconnect right there. So food safety, I'm going to talk about this more later in the class. All that you need to know is that schools are more responsible for it. They weren't in the past. This is a major component in the second half of the class. So air and water pollution. This is another one. In the South, in Texas, Oklahoma, California, Arizona, air pollution and water pollution is becoming a problem. But in Pennsylvania, not as much. We really haven't hit the point that we have in the Southwest yet. School districts aren't responsible for air and water pollution prevention yet, but I think it's something that could come down the pipeline. If any of you decide to move out of state to teach, you're probably going to see this, but you're not going to see it in Pennsylvania. So children will experience diversity-based discrimination in schools. We've discussed in Intro to Education when you had that class, there's disproportionate minorities in leadership roles. I would argue it's not the case in teaching positions. If you go into most urban districts, there is a highly represented population of minorities teaching, but you won't see many minorities in leadership positions, which causes a problem because children don't have the opportunity to connect with different types of teachers and people in leadership roles. In teaching early childhood education for 8 years, I very rarely have a male in the class. So think about that in terms of what a child experiences between kindergarten, first, second, third grade. If you don't have a male teacher and the child doesn't have a male role model figure at home, they're left with females till they get to the upper middle grades. That's a problem and that's a challenge. As a former elementary school administrator, I always looked for a good male teaching candidate. I would rather hire an average male teaching candidate than an excellent female just because of what it could do for children. And that's always something that it's a struggle because there aren't men that are in these positions. Now you go to a high school, it's loaded with male role models. But my question is it too late? And that's something you have to think about too. So, preventative health, we're going to talk about the personal and national standards. The national standards you cover in your classes. Personal is what you should be using in your safety plans and assignments. So I give you a list. Once again, the lists that I provide you with, you can look at them here. They're all in the textbook. I'm not going to bother reading them, but you can see them in your PowerPoint presentations, and it's stuff that you can actually look at. And if this is something you think benefits you in an assignment, feel free to look at it. But these are an example of personal preventative health, and here's an example of national preventative health practices. So, Healthy People 2020 came from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This tried to increase healthy eating and living, and anger and violence prevention. Chapter 10, I think, in the textbook, we're going to really look at anger and violence prevention, but we're going to look at how health increases through public awareness and sort of an idea and an understanding of really what preventative health is through Healthy People 2020. So I give you the objectives once again. You can certainly look at these on your own, but these are things that we're going to talk about throughout this entire class. Canada really is worried about universal health care. They want a unified approach through healthcare so that all children have the same access. It could happen in the United States in a similar way. If you want to compare what they're doing in Canada to the United States, if you're interested in this, this is certainly worth a look as well. So CHIP, this covers 7.4 million children in the United States in 2008. It's children's health insurance. It gives very low-cost medical and dental care, immunizations, prescriptions, mental health treatment, and hospitalization when needed. As I noted a few slides ago, the real inequity comes in dental care, but the medical care provided through CHIP is certainly beneficial and good for kids who need it. So for kids that don't have health insurance, they have the ability to have access to it. So child care facilities do different types of programs. I'm not going to talk about any of these in depth, but if you do work in a child care facility, you might want to look at moving kids safely, tummy time, and back to sleep. Those are different things that you can pursue, look at as something that might interest you. So what are the national standards for child care? Child staff ratios, we're going to talk about this in class a little bit, the credentials you need and training. The ideas for healthy development, what you can do in terms of community partnership, supervision, health promotion and protection. We're going to spend a lot of time on this. We're going to look at really what you can do for food services related to health promotion and nutritional requirements as well. That's the second half of the course. Facilities. Facilities is the big project in here. I'm focused on facilities because it's the one thing that I know that's universal for everybody that's taking this class. Some of you are going to work specifically in child development. Some of you are going to try to be elementary school teachers. Some of you might end up doing social work or human services. I know that some of you aren't going to have access to have anything to do with the food program. If you're an elementary school teacher, the principal makes that decision. The cafeteria worker makes that decision. You don't. If you're in a child care facility, you do make that decision. Safety. Every one of you will have something to do with safety. So my final project in this class is safety because it's going to pertain to every single person taking this class. So I'm really focusing on facilities, supplies, equipment, and transportation. That is the big idea, big concept in this class, and it's really what I want you to get out of it. We'll talk about infectious diseases, we'll talk about kids with special needs, we'll talk about administration and licensing and community action. But like I said, my focus is facilities and safety management because it pertains to everybody that's in this course. So NCLB tried to basically create healthy living programs in schools. The easiest way for a school to meet those requirements was through physical education programs. Most schools took it, they revised their phys ed programs, they made them co-ed, they added nutrition into it. Those of you that recently graduated from high school, you probably had to take written tests as part of your gym class, gym classes. Things have changed in the United States, certainly from when I was a student. As somebody who has worked with many pre-service teachers, I will say this, the certification test for phys ed is one of the toughest in the United States. You wouldn't think it, but it is, because you have to know rules for sports, you have to know health regulations, you have to know safety regulations. It's probably one of the toughest certifications to obtain. And that changed. It wasn't that way when I was getting certified. It is now, though. So understanding and knowing healthy living programs is something that phys ed teachers need to do and health teachers need to do. So this is how schools really adjusted to it, and they really put it in the hands of them to better certify and better prepare themselves. So if you want to look at the coordinated school health program, you're certainly welcome to. I provide a link to it. It gives wellness programs for staff and students. If you do these, it cuts your healthcare costs at the school district. I worked for Edinburgh University for 2 years as a program director, and one of the things that I had to do, I had to earn 50 wellness points per year. I had to go to seminars, I had to create, I had to take questionnaires. Probably took about 30 to 40 hours a year for me to do these requirements. It cut my healthcare down by 33% just by doing these seminars. You will have those options in some of the public schools that you work at because the schools want to save money. And the schools are going to save money by having these wellness programs.